Hello and welcome to Should the Black Ferns be on equal pay? And I guess, having just watched the video, this is going to be a bit of a misleading headline, but that's nothing new in the media, is it? Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and thank you very much for joining me. There was an article in one of the papers over here in New Zealand where Black Ferns payment not sustainable, says Tu. Now, Steve Tu is the head of New Zealand Rugby, or I'm not quite sure what his exact title is, but basically he runs New Zealand Rugby over here. And clearly, for him to come out and say that Black Ferns' pay is not sustainable, that got the predicted reaction on social media. There's a large Facebook group of New Zealand sports fans that I'm part of, and there was plenty of the rubbish and a lot more swearing, saying that he's talking rubbish and that he should be able to fund the Black Ferns. If you go on to read the article, it mentions in there that he says, or the article says that he says that equal pay is with the men's is not sustainable, which is very true. It's not. Already New Zealand Rugby are losing their top players to Europe, and to suggest that the Black Ferns could be on the same amount of pay as the All Blacks is pretty clear that the New Zealand Rugby could not sustain that kind of expenditure. But also, if you think about it, I've not actually seen anybody come out and say that the Black Ferns should be getting, or the women's that the women's are expecting or wanting to get the same funding as the men's side. And that applies across the board, not just in New Zealand, but also in England and in all the other nations as well. Actually, if you listen to the interview, the written article is misleading. He doesn't talk about suggesting that equal pay is sustainable. In fact, it doesn't even get mentioned in the interview at all, and that does get written in the article, which is misleading, unfortunately. But that's the standard media we're getting at the moment in New Zealand, where they like to spin things. So yes, I don't think anybody is asking or anyone is expecting to get equal pay on the women's side compared to the men's side. And yes, I agree, that is unsustainable with the current funding that is in place. What actually kind of raised my interest was what a lot of people were saying on social media. The majority of people were saying, and to be fair, that this was rubbish, a large proportion. Then there was a large portion saying, yeah, right, equal pay is not sustainable, but come on, a living wage is sustainable. And that's my position at the moment, is I believe that a living wage for the female game, at the top of the female game, is sustainable and should be in place. We'll come on to that in a second. But then, looking at some of the other comments that we see out there, I mean, there is a couple of comments I've heard both on podcasts and also actually read is, yes, it's good. It would be good to fund the women's game, but the question is, where does that funding come from? What gets cut to allow this to happen? Does it come out of the men's salaries? Does it come out of rugby development? Does it come out of grassroots? Does it come out of development officers? Who knows? And that is a fair argument as to where it comes from. And I don't have an answer for that one. But to give you an idea as to kind of how much we're talking about, at least one person reckoned it would be about a sort of 1.2% of the New Zealand Rugby's annual expenditure. It would take about that to cover the women's, to pay for the women's international team salary. So it's not a large section of their expenditure, but it is definitely not insignificant either. But let's just read out a couple of the sort of other side of the comments of that were in that Facebook group. Okay, let's get real here. 1, how many tests have Black Ferns played in the last 4 years? 2, what revenue did they bring into Rugby Union? By the way, I love the team. Another one, fair enough, they don't play the number of games the All Blacks play, pay them based on that. Now, let's be honest, it's not the women, it's not the players that decide how many games they get to play. It's the administrators that decide that, and it's the administrator's job to get to increase those games. If we look at the women's game on the 15s side, the only regular international tournament is in Europe, which is the Six Nations, or top tier one that I'm aware of anyway. And New Zealand really do need to set up and organise a regular international women's 15s competition if they're going to be serious about funding and having the 15s as growing the game well, globally and also in New Zealand itself. At the moment, there is an NPC, which is the Farah Palmer Cup in New Zealand. That's a domestic competition, and currently there are sides in Auckland, Bay of Plenty, Counties, Manukau, Canterbury, North Harbour, Manawatu, Otago, Waikato and Wellington. So there are 9 sides across New Zealand. That means teams, that provinces such as Tasman, Taranaki, Northland, Southland don't have a women's side. And I'm sure there's others that I can't remember off the top of my head. So there's still room for growth domestically as well. So domestically they need to grow it out so that all of the provinces that have teams in the Mitre 10 Cup have a women's team. And I think they should set them an aspirational target of having those teams in place within an X time frame and get those provinces set up so they actually start making an effort. I also think that they need to work with Australia, Japan, Hong Kong in particular, as those 3 sides were at the Women's Rugby World Cup. Clearly those are 3 of the top women's sides in the world, so New Zealand should be working with them, also perhaps working with the Pacific Islands as well that have got a national team, to set up some form of annual domestic competition so that the women know they're going to have proper competitions on a regular basis. I do think contracting the Black Ferns full-time professionally would be a very good move, as it would be provide an aspirational side of things for young players, so players can see that, hey, if I play for my province, I'm successful, I make it to Black Ferns, I can go full-time. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's enough that when they retire they don't have to work again in their lives. No, clearly they're going to have to get jobs after their careers, and they're going to need career development along the way. But they should be, to me, that aspiration would help bring more players into the game and would help grow the game as well. If we look at some of the TV audiences that we've had from the Women's Rugby World Cup in Europe, there is clearly a demand to watch the women's rugby over there, which would mean that if you had a full-time 15 side, you could go on tour in November or in a window to Europe, and I'm sure there would be some that they'd be able to get some good TV revenue from those games. Now, there would have to be discussions about revenue sharing, and it would have to also be different to the men's game where only the host gets the revenue. But there's potential of raising revenue that way, and again, growing the women's game. But you can only go on those sort of tours if your players are full-time. People can't be taking out months at a time from their day jobs to go and do these things. They have to be full-time to be able to achieve those sort of targets. Obviously, working it around the sevens would be useful as well, so that the players can play both. So you wouldn't want to go on tour when there are sevens tournaments on, and that would have to happen as well. And sevens is the big elephant in the room. Is women's rugby the first place where sevens is going to eclipse 15? So that's really what the question mark is here. With women's rugby having the Olympic platform via the sevens, there's a lot more money going into the sevens. England, for example, have dropped their 15s contracts and only going to do sevens contracts for the next 2 years up to the Rugby World Cup. They kept the sevens contracts for the last 2 years, as well as adding the 15s contracts in. If you look at the players that are professional in Scotland, Ireland, etc., again, they're sevens players. I'm not saying their sevens programs are fully professional, but they do have professional players. New Zealand, they have professional players on the sevens side. It's the 15 side that don't. So are we seeing that that basically 15s is going to stay amateur, and that sevens is going to be the professional side of the sport? I don't know. Maybe that is where things are going to go, and that actually 15s will be best left staying as the amateur side. Anyway, just some thoughts there. Oh, and on the sevens side, next year there are plans to have a professional sevens domestic tournament in the USA. I did see one person's comment in social media that there are people in the USA looking at contracting sevens players. So maybe there'll be some poaching that way if the unions don't get themselves organised. That tournament does plan to have equal pay for both the men's and the women's in that sevens tournament. So there does have to keep an eye on the new world as well as to what may be happening there on this side of things. thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, link above on Twitter, down below on YouTube. Comes out once a week on a Thursday and covers all of my videos during the week, and also other live shows as well. So please do sign up for that. Thank you very much for joining me. Always up for good rugby chats. Do leave your comments and what your thoughts around this is. As I say, it's definitely a hot topic at the moment, and it's always great to have a chat.